What's going on, you guys? So, there's a viral clip going around of Teddy Atlas giving his thoughts on if he thinks Canelo Alvarez is a little bit overrated. This question really began when they were discussing the Terrence Crawford Canelo Alvarez fight, and the topic got brought up about, is Canelo a little bit overrated? This was based off of his last performance. He very underwhelming performance, to say the very least, against William Scholl. And it brought into question, hey, is this, the end of Canelo? Is he a little washed right now? Like, is the legs gone? Like, is the desire gone? Is he just not getting up for these fights anymore? Or is it just that he ran into a stylistic fight that didn't make him look good, and really it exposed him? It made him look a little bit overrated, right? And I'm going to say, like I've been saying, well before I even started this channel, that Canelo's overrated. He's very, very overrated. And the reason I think that is because if you look at Canelo Alvarez's, his resume, his career thus far, there's been very particular, matchmaking, him picking certain fights, certain fighters at the right time, whether a guy's coming off a loss or just hasn't looked that good, or, so on and so forth. Picking a certain weight class for a certain fighter, rehydration clauses, you name it. Canelo Alvarez has done it to gain an advantage going into any fight. But the reason I think he's overrated is a lot of people said he was too green when he fought Floyd Mayweather. Keep in mind, Floyd Mayweather is one of the greatest fighters of all time. But really what that did was give a blueprint out on how to beat a Canelo Alvarez at that time. And it was just strictly box. You have to have a good IQ and boxing ability in order to beat a Canelo Alvarez. And Floyd Mayweather did it with ease. And we've seen Canelo Alvarez struggle with certain guys, certain styles, at certain points in his career, right? His only other defeat thus far has been Dimitri Bivol. And a lot of people came up with an excuse for Canelo at that fight, that Dimitri Bivol was too big, and Canelo Alvarez was just daring to be great. There was no business for him to go up to 106 or 175 pounds to fight a Canelo or to fight a Dimitri Bivol. That was just absurd. It's not that big of a deal. He lost to him and got absolutely schooled. No, but I guess it was a great accomplishment when he beat a washed-up Kovalev at 175 pounds. He wasn't too small for that weight class at that time with that fighter, right? And then you fast forward, or let's back up a little bit. We saw him struggle against Erislandy Lara. A lot of people thought Lara actually won that fight. Very controversial. Austin Trout gave him some trouble. He ultimately won that fight. And then you seen him kind of immediately after the Erislandy Lara fight, not really fight too many guys that pose good footwork, good foot movement, hand speed, boxing ability, a high boxing IQ. We didn't really see too many guys with those attributes fighting Canelo after that fight, right? We saw him fight Liam Smith, a blown-up Amir Khan that he fought at a catchweight, a James Kirkland, guys like that either were just not on his level or were just too small. There was something to it, right? Moves up to 160 pounds, fights Triple G. I thought he lost the first fight. And then he pops dirty going into the second fight. And I still even thought he lost the second fight. But guess what? The first fight ended in a draw. The second fight, he got the nod. And then he fights Triple G later on after he got schooled by Bivol in a trilogy. But then during that time period, also at 154, he had Demetrius Andrade and both of the Charlo brothers, who all were champions, and he didn't fight any of them. He fought an old Miguel Cotto, right, that he blew up to dang near cruiserweight to fight. The day of the fight, Cotto looked very, very small in the ring compared to Canelo. There was no rehydration clause that fight. But had he fought a bigger guy that night, there definitely would have been. So you move up to 160 pounds, right? Gets the belts from Triple G. He fights Danny Jacobs, the weakest link at the division. That was a champion. Could have fought Charlo. Could have fought Andrade again. Same two dudes that were both the same weight class as him at 154. They followed him up to 160. Still didn't get no smoke with him. Canelo vacates the title pretty much, making Jamal Charlo the franchise champion, right? Andrade, at one point, was the only other guy in the weight class that had a belt. Had he fought Andrade and beat him, he would have been undisputed at 160 pounds. And, early on in Canelo's campaign at 160, he said he wanted to be undisputed, right? That would have been a perfect opportunity to become undisputed. The only opportunity for you to become undisputed, but you avoided that guy. Instead, he moves up to 175, fights a washed-up Kovalev, stops him. Then he moves back down to 168, campaigns there, beats up a Rocky Fielding, Neil Durham, Billy Joe with no punching power, Callum Smith. He went on his, what they call it, the European tour, right? And he beat a Caleb Plant, who I think, that's probably one of the best ones he has on his resume, if not the best. Because Caleb Plant has, proven to be a good quality fighter. And at that time he was undefeated, even though Caleb Plant at that time really didn't beat anyone of note. And then he later ended up losing to, David Benavidez, who happens to be the guy that pretty much Canelo's been running from for the past few years now, to the point where not only David Benavidez, but David Morrell, the two of those guys, had to move up to 175 pounds to make their fight happen, because Canelo avoided both of them. So I don't know how people can say that Canelo Alvarez is the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, that he's the greatest 168-pound fighter of all time, when he's avoided a Mexican fighter in David Benavidez, right? Who not only is Mexican, which, if you're the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, why aren't you fighting one of your other countrymen to prove that you're the best Mexican of all time? Not only that, but to prove that you're the best 168-pound fighter in the division in your era. Right? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if, let's say David Benavidez, he happened to get knocked out, or he happened to lose and not look too good in a couple fights. It wouldn't surprise me if Canelo then fought him, right? That'd be the only time he'd fight him. He's not going to fight him when he's undefeated. There really seems to be no game, blueprint on how to beat a David Benavidez right now. Canelo's not going to do that, and we've seen it. If you just look at the way he's moved throughout his career, that's not a way a great fighter, an all-time great would move. And to make it even worse, in your most notable fights, your most notable wins have asterisks next to them because they're controversial. Meaning, you could have lost, and you did lose in a lot of people's eyes. And if it hadn't have been for Oscar De La Hoya, putting a little bit of money in a couple judges' pockets, you probably wouldn't be in the position you're in. But at the same time, you can look at it and say, it makes sense. Because, yeah, Canelo wouldn't be in the position he's in right now if it hadn't been for selective matchmaking and having a big time promoter, pretty much pay his way throughout his career. We wouldn't be getting big mega fights with Canelo. There would be another star for sure. But Canelo right now has a massive fan base. And he draws a lot of tickets, a lot of pay-per-view buys, and just brings a lot of money and attention to the sport of boxing. So people don't want to mess that up. The higher ups, they don't want to mess that up. And have Canelo go out there and fight a Lara and look bad and lose. If you fight a bunch of, in this case, if you actually fought the best fighters throughout the course of your career, your record would look a lot worse. And it should, really, based off the guys you already fought, because you should have lost more than twice. But I just hope, and I've said it before, I don't want any excuses for Terence Crawford for when he beats the brakes off of Canelo. People are already saying that Canelo's washed up, doesn't look the same. I don't want that to be the case, and I don't want that to be said after Crawford does beat him. To me, I can say he's overrated, and I'm not meaning it in a way to take away from what Terence Crawford's about to do, because no matter how I may feel about Canelo, guess what? He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. It doesn't take away the fact that he is technically a 4-division champ, and he is a 2-time undisputed 168-pound champion. None of those things, my opinion, or anyone else's, can take away from those accomplishments. So, regardless, Canelo is a good fighter. Is he overrated? Absolutely. 100%. 100%. But, like I said, I just don't want it to take away from the magnitude of the accomplishment that it would be for Terence Crawford to become a 3-time, 3-division undisputed world champion, and then just ride off in the sunset in retirement. But that's all I got. Let me know what you guys think. Is Canelo Alvarez an overrated fighter? Let me know what you think. Hate, like, comment, subscribe.